Welcome to Geo Proximity Trial 5. This is going to be our final trial, and all the previous 4 trials boils down to this final trial. So, um, I thank you for staying this long and watching through all the previous trials and reading through our documentation. And so I'm going to be explaining you the new changes in the code, as well as experimenting on another device to prove its capabilities. So, first thing is our data streaming method. So, we had initially used SSH pass for remotely accessing a computer, retrieve the data, so on and so forth. We've experimented with that, and unfortunately, it doesn't work. Like SSH pass doesn't work because SSH pass is strictly Linux, and second, it doesn't work on if the computer that you're trying to access is on a different internet network. So then we tried experimenting with another library that is similar in syntax and does the same exact thing as SSH pass. It's called Paramiko. And Anish ran it on his computer, and it again didn't work. So we're resolving to a new method. So this is going to require one one function for server, the other function for client, kind of like um, what we did in Geo Proximity Trial 3 with sockets. But this time the middleman isn't going to be sockets, it's going to be Gmail. The reason why we're using Gmail is first we have experience sending emails with through Gmail and SMTP-lib like we demonstrated in the SMS trials. And second, Gmail is accessible over the internet. So as long as your computer is connected to the internet, you will be able to access Gmail. That way, there's a higher probability of it working. So let's explain the server first. And I already have the server running here, just waiting for any responses, but we're not going to be having any responses yet. So first, we're going to start off with reading the inbox and getting the data on whatever, and we're using IMAP-lib for this. And then if there's any response, then if it's like an incident report or updating the database, then there won't be like the server won't send a reply email. It'll just send it won't do anything. It'll just write to the database, and then the transaction will be over. However, if the client is requesting data from the database, then the program is going to send an email back, and this is done here. Now in the client, this one is going to send an email based on the requirements. Like if the client wants to retrieve data or wants to write to the database, so on and so forth. This is the part where it does it. Here is where it reads from the database and retrieves data. And notice that it's if status equals reading. So only if the client is trying to retrieve data, that's when this code is going to be activated. So it's going to read for a reply and kind of a stamp to make sure that the emails aren't getting confused between each other, is having an IP address for this in the subject of the email. And then once it gets the reply from the server, then it will process the data and then run the geo proximity stuff. And I'll get to the geo proximity stuff shortly. The one error with this is that if you're trying to ask for data, yet the database doesn't have any data for you, then it will return an error. So since I had cleared the database, we're going to have to be running this code. But first, let me go over the new changes in geo.py. So first is in our previous geo proximity maps, If you put a marker on a single point, like multiple of them, then the most recently plotted one will show up, and only that one. Now we wanted to make it more adaptable and compatible with different situations. So our code is going to sort the data that's coming from the database, and this is basically the part where it's like separating the data and arranging them in the way that we want it. Pinpoint incident will, as you may already know, plot it onto the map. And then we also have a color code system that if the status of the missing person is kidnapped, it'll have a color code of red. Lost, injured, or missing will have a color code of orange. Endangered runaway would have a color code of purple. And then it'll plot the geo proximity circles. And we're kind of applying the same thing with the geo proximity circles as well. So if you plot a big circle on top of a small circle, then you're only going to be able to view the details of the big circle, not the small circle. So we have to arrange the circles as well based on the size. Which brings me to the final point, the final change is we're requiring a timestamp and a date stamp. Previously, we had used elapsed time, like elapsed time of 30 minutes or so. Now it's going to be a time and a date. This is to make it more realistic because after some time, people can go farther. So we have to take that in mind, and it's not a consistent. So in the previous trials, we only did it to just get a feel of the geo proximity and have constant data to work with before we try anything new. So this part addresses it. Sherlock DB also addresses it as well. It's a few minor tweaks here. Okay, now with this already running, let us get started. As you noticed, there wasn't any reply. It's just writing to the database. So now that we have some data in the database, let's ask for some data. Okay, so I'll just keep it here. Okay, so here's the orange marker. And if we refer back to geo.py, this person is lost, injured, missing. So the person assigned to case ID 1 is lost, injured, or missing. Now if we scroll out, we have the giant geo proximity circle here. And the reason why I made it like I removed the fill is because the bigger the circles are, the more confusing it gets. So I just kept that in consideration here. So far so good. It works on my computer, and now we're going to demonstrate on the other computer. So also I had created a Gmail account specifically for the data transactions, and if we go to trash here, no. Okay, so what happens is that once an email arrives, the server will process it and deletes it. So I'm not exactly sure why it isn't showing up here. May have just automatically deleted itself. So, but now we show it's working. So now I'm gonna show you the code on my Chromebook. Okay. Okay, this is on a different computer completely. This is on my Chromebook, and I'm using this web-based programming editor and running software called Replit. And Replit doesn't support displaying HTML files, so I'm just going to be printing the data to show that it works. So without further ado, let's run it.
Okay, here's the data. So this bar, just ignore it. It's part of my data sorting and manipulating process here. So I'm just changing certain character or certain strings to be ignored. This is the data that we had ran on my other computer and that we had updated to the database. So here it is, the final trial of Geo Proximity. There are still a few changes that I believe can be made. For example, the length of geo.py. I think there's some things that may be unnecessary. And also there are a few, I'm not going to say bugs per se, but on occasion certain parameters or certain weird things just stop the code, like it's a bug, like it stops the code from working. Like there's some error with the login or something, or selecting or fetching certain data. It says it's not allowed or something. But for the majority of the time it's working, and I've proved it. So over the whole span of recording this video, it didn't run into any of that kind of problem. So yeah, thanks for listening.